Welcome to Between the Poles, the podcast where we dive deep into the heart of the pole community. I'm your host, Caroline. Here, it's not just about the tricks and the spin, it's about the stories, the people, and the connection that make our community so special. Every episode, we sit down with pole artists, studio owners, and inspiring members of the community to talk about their journeys, challenges, and passions. So grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and let's get real. This is Between the Poles. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Between the Poles. Today's episode, we'll be talking with Stacey Shapiro. Hi, Stacey. Nice to have you on. How are you today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to kind of start chit-chatting with you today because I feel like our viewers and our listeners are going to be able to take a lot out of this conversation. You do a lot in the pole world, and we'll come to that. Can you start off, like we start off every episode, can you tell us a little bit about your pole journey? How did you start? Where are you at now? Kind of the whole thing, basically.
Yeah, totally. So I've been pole dancing for about half my life, which is kind of crazy to think about. My mom is an aerialist, or she had an aerial dance company. I grew up most of my life in Baltimore, Maryland. So she brought aerial dance to Baltimore, Maryland. So I kind of saw it growing up. And when I was about 17, she was like, I was in art school. She was like, you need to do some more fitness, do some more types of fitness. And she brought me to a gym and I hated it. And so she was like, well, I have a friend who does pole dancing. Would you want to go to a pole class with her or to take one of the pole classes? And at the time you had to be 18 to take pole dancing because this was back in 2009, early 2009. So when we look at how things have shifted, like it was just a different time in the pole community. So she was like, all right, I'm going to drop you off at there was one pole studio about 20 minutes away from our house. And she brought me over there, not realizing you had to be 18. She drops me off. I'm like, okay, let's hope they don't ask my age. Nobody asked my age. And that was like, from the first class I went in there, I was like, oh my gosh, these women are so strong and beautiful. And at the time it was a women's only pole studio because that's kind of how it was back in 2009. And I felt like this little kid in a candy shop where I was like, I just want to be here all the time. And from that point on, I was just like, I was obsessed. I was going to every single class all the time. But they had the one pole competition. You had to be 21. So I didn't tell anyone my age because I always tried to pretend that I was like the older one, which I think I was a junior in high school.
How were you telling people you were?
Nobody was asking me. So I was just kind of like, oh, I'm about to go to college. Like, that was it. Like, I was almost, honestly, I just avoided the question completely.
All right.
And so, yeah, I became obsessed. For my 18th birthday, my parents bought me a pole for my bedroom. And I became like, it literally shifted. I was going to school for art, decided to then shift into health education with a minor in nutrition. And I honestly, because I became so obsessed with like how pole was making my body feel. And I was like, I need to start taking care of myself to get stronger or to be able to do these tricks. Or like I had a whole new appreciation on how to treat my body after stepping into that first pole class. I also was slightly obsessive and I was going to like probably like 8 to 10 classes a week. Like I became obsessed. So thank you.
So you went from like 0 to 100.
When I said I was obsessed, and my parents were like, we're going to support this because this is really, you're loving this. And so thankfully my parents like supported me in like my love for pole. And then when I was in college and my friend started opening up a pole studio. So I ended up helping her open a pole studio, the second pole studio that I ended up teaching at. It was the first one I was teaching at. And then from there, I got hired as a performing artist in Atlantic City. So I was kind of traveling and working as a pole for a company as a pole performer. And that just kind of started my whole journey into performing, competing. I was certified as a personal trainer, ended up getting my degree in health education with a minor in nutrition, and that kind of took off. And now, I moved to the West Coast, so I'm in San Diego now. And I started my online business specifically in nutrition. And then over the pandemic, decided to go full force into just like, I want to work with the pole community. And yeah, it's been it'll be 16 years. Actually, no, wow, it's January. It's 16 years this month. Okay.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So 16 years ago. And now this is what I do full time. I absolutely love it. And yeah, I specialize in helping pole dancers get stronger with strength training, conditioning, and nutrition specifically.
And we'll kind of circle back to it because I do want to touch up on that specific aspect of your pole journey. But I do have a couple of questions. One,
Yeah.
what kind of aerialist was your mom? Like, what did she specifically kind of do?
Yeah, so she had a company called Air Dance Bernasconi, and it was low flying trapeze, silks, and lyra specifically. But there was other types of aerial apparatus that would come into play. So it was a lot of different types. There was no one specific type of like.
Did you ever kind of play around a little bit with the silks and the lyra? Because I know a lot of people that do pole, some of them do lyra and silk at the same time, and some of them start there and then kind of go to pole or the other way around.
Yeah, I did. I grew up kind of just playing on silks and yeah, just kind of trapeze, and it was just she would hang it in our backyard, and it was just like a very normal thing, and it was just like I never like practiced it consistently, but it was always something that we could just like mess around with, and I grew up watching her perform. I was always around aerialists. It was just a very normal environment for me. Yeah.
And then I've been kind of asking this to all the guests because I want our viewers and our listener, because we all come from the different background. When you went to that first pole class, because you had been playing a little bit with other aerial arts, were you from the get-go able to pull body weight? Like, did you pick it up super fast, or is that a journey you had to kind of train for?
Yeah, I picked it up pretty quickly, which is a blessing and a curse because it was like, oh, I got real strong real fast, and my technique was completely out the window. Yeah.
A lot of us, I feel, like you said, we go from 0 to 100, and then the little details or the little like transitions are a little iffy.
Yes.
And we're kind of at the beginning, at least I found that a lot of us chase like the next big thing because we're like, how far can I make it as fast as possible instead of being like really on the foundation? I also had a question because you said a friend opened a second. Was that the same friend that had the first studio, or how did this person end up opening a studio?
Yeah. So I met her at the first studio, and then it was just, we kind of like evolved, and we wanted to do more competitions and more higher level classes, and she ended up wanting to open up another studio. And at the time we had both started doing CrossFit and bodybuilding, so we were both like really into like the heavy lifting and like trying to get as ripped as possible. And so we ended up she opened up a studio in the bottom of a CrossFit gym, like in the basement of a CrossFit gym, so there was CrossFit on top, and then there was pull in like the basement. It looked like a dungeon. And yeah, it was pretty cool. So I helped her open that and taught there up until I moved to San Diego.
And then why pole? Because you played a little bit with, let's say, like silks and different aerial arts. Then
Yeah.
you're really into CrossFit. Why concentrate on pole? Like, what kept you coming back? Teachers, community, like the different moves? Like, why did that one stick?
Yeah, I feel like it was just super empowering. I always struggled with body image. I really struggled with self-esteem growing up. I feel like it was always I went through puberty really young. There was always something that like I was also very aware of in terms of my physical body. And I feel like once I found pole, it was like this new way of being strong, and it was just it made me feel like I'd never felt before. I felt sexy. I'd never like understood what that felt like. And then I was like, it's not being sexy for anybody else, but it's being sexy for myself,
Yeah.
which was extremely empowering. I was able to move however I wanted to without being judged, which was huge. So I think the community, not just the physical like aspect of it and feeling empowered physically, but it was also just the ability to be surrounded by people who had the same mindset as me and felt the same way and was going through the same journey as me. And there was a lot of relatability there, and support, and just like the feeling of like I had always struggled with like having necessarily like deep connections with people, and I was like, oh my God, these are my people. Like I never had that like one group where I was part of in high school or in middle school. I felt like I was a little bit kind of like scattered, and then I was like, I found my people. These are my people. Yeah.
And then I know this is a hard question, but I keep on asking because I'm always kind of curious to hear how people describe their style. Like, how would you describe your style? And I know it's such a general question, but like trick or choreo, when you do trick, what do you kind of prefer working on? When you do choreo, what's your style in that? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's I would say strength and power. I tend to gravitate towards the strong, powerful, like just my physical body. I'm very much like, let's do all the stuff. I'm working on slowing down and not just relying on like the strength tricks, but they tend to come very naturally. And so actually last year I started taking more heels classes because I was like, I need to stay closer to the floor and get a little bit more fluid and learn a little bit more about how to move without always focusing on like the power combos. But yeah, I would say power and strength is kind of like my style if I were to put a label on it.
It's all right. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Then I am steering this conversation completely to a different place, but at this time of this recording, you're just shy of 30,000 followers, which is quite an accomplishment. Like, congrats on that.
Thanks.
Then, how did that start? Like, can you tell us a little bit more about any of that?
Yeah. Social media has always been something that I needed to build for my business. I had a meal prep company, which was my first business. And through that, I had to kind of like learn how to like understand social media. And then when I got rid of my meal prep company, I transitioned into online nutrition, and I wanted to do online nutrition and training, but I was very kind of general with that. But I knew I was like, okay, I need to put out content there. And then when the pandemic started, I hired business coaches, and I joined a group called Legacy. And it was probably the best thing I could have ever done because I actually had a strategy in terms of like how I was starting to like create content, which I was not just like putting things out there in terms of like random content. I started to be a little bit more educational, and I was like, I want to get my community wins, and I want to start building that trust within my community. I want people to see how I coach and how I teach, and I want them to be able to learn from me without feeling like they have to just like, invest in like like a product or a private or something like, you know, it's kind of like a try before you buy sort of thing on Instagram if you're trying to build a business. And and so yeah, I through that I was gaining a lot of traction just by making those little tutorials on like, here's some conditioning movements that you can do for like an invert, or here's one thing like one thing that you can take into to help with like a square split or something like that. I don't do tutorials in terms of tricks. I do more strength and conditioning tips and tricks to help with specific movements. um and then like 2 years ago, I did a shoulder mount like tutorial, and I had about, I think at that point, like 9,000 followers, and the shoulder mount tutorial like blew up, and I was like, oh, people really like shoulder mounts apparently. And then from there, the shoulder mount, like that kind of like I gained a lot of traction from that. And then it was also like a lot of collaborations with people, through my business coaching program. I was able to meet other people within the pole community. A lot of people know Emily Rausch. She's she's a chiropractor. She's one of my best friends. And we met through
Your account as well.
yeah, she's awesome. But so she's one of my best friends, and like one of the like, I feel like through just like working with other professionals in the online space, doing more collaborations, doing podcasts like this, getting more outreach, meeting more people, that was the growth just kind of continued naturally, like that snowball effect. And yeah, it's just been kind of this continued growth going into 2025, which I'm very grateful for because it allows me to reach a broad audience. And when you have an online business, that's super important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember, or was it always like a conscious decision that at some point you wanted to live off of pole, basically, right? And build businesses that kind of are at not the center, but are at the outreach of pole? Like, because you did say like you offer tips and tricks that are pole related and nutrition that is pole related, like, did you from the get-go, as soon as you kind of fell in love with pole, was like, listen, I'm going to try to make this like my full-time job? Like, when did that happen?
Oh no, that was not. I was actually really scared to talk about pole to a lot of people. Initially, yeah, I feel like in the beginning, back in 2009, like no, pole was not something that a lot of people understood, and it was like, oh, you're a stripper, and well, it's like, who cares if you're a stripper? It's also different than what I'm doing, and there was a lot of assumptions I felt like that was being told people would be made. And for that, I got a little hesitant about it, especially when I started to do personal trainings, like more like with just like kind of like just the everyday people. I never knew what they were going to assume about me based off of like if I was a pole dancer, if I told them about that. And I think there was like, and I hate to say this, but there was a lot of shame there because of like projections of like people in my past life. And like I had this one boyfriend who was like, didn't want me to post anything online because he was like so embarrassed by like what I did. And I was like, you know, like those kinds of things kept like popping into my brain. And I was like, will I be able to make money if I tell people that this is what I do for fun? So at that time, it was just like side gig and I was doing it for fun. And then um, when I decided the pandemic kind of hit and I was like, you know what, fuck it. Am I allowed to swear on this? Oh, okay. Sorry. I was just like, I said that and I was like, wait, I said that. Okay. So I was just kind of like, fuck
If
it.
you're listening to this in your car with young people, Stacey's really sorry. If not, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just like, you know what? This is me. I'm not ashamed of this. I'm not like, it doesn't matter if you're in my community or you're not in my community. Like, I only want to have like people who care and are authentic to me, especially with, my clients. Like, I don't want super judgmental clients. I don't want to work with people who are going to, judge me for, my love and what makes me super happy in life. So, yeah. So then when the pandemic hit, I realized like the pole community was what I really wanted to do, or the people that I really wanted to work with. I was like, I always come back to this community. I always come back, even Roxy's in the background. She's saying hi. So yeah, it was never intentional. It just kind of like, it was a natural progression based off of, I think, me having to live some life, go through some business experience. And then finally it was like, coming home to myself and realizing what was really important for me. And if I was going to have a business, this is what I wanted to do. Yeah.
All right. And let's talk a little bit more about your business. Actually, I'm not sure how you describe it because I know there's quite a few different aspects to it. Can you just generally talk to us about how that came about, how you built it up, and kind of any aspect of it and what people kind of not follow you for, but let's say your clients or whatever, like what are you putting out there? Can you tell our viewers and our listeners?
Yeah. So I'm an online strength and conditioning coach specific to pole dancers. So that means like I work one-on-one with clients, and then I'll have group programs. So my signature strength and conditioning program is called Creative Conditioning, and I'm currently in the launch for that right now. I do some self-paced courses. So if students want, some ways to cross training, they are able to access like videos and learn how to do cross training specific to pole dancers. I'll do online workshops. Everything's virtual. I do teach in person 2 to 3 times a week, but the majority of my work is virtual. So, so everything is, I'm working with clients all over the world, depending on where they are, time zones, things like that, and depending on their goals. And so, yeah, it's specifically one-on-one group programs, self-paced courses, and it's all based around strength and conditioning. With my one-on-one, I don't do a lot of like specific tricks with like the group courses and the self-paced programs, but I do with the one-on-ones. I do a lot of training for competitions. Right now, a lot of people are training for PSO, and then in person, I also do a competition training group. At the studio that I teach at, which is called Pole Buzz, which is right down the street from me. So there's a little bit of everything involved when it comes to the online business. But yeah, specific to strength and conditioning. And then I do nutrition as well for specific to fueling performance for pole dancers, because I feel like it's a big foundation that we're kind of the key part to fueling everything else when it comes to our pole journey. So, yeah.
How did it start for you? Did you start with the nutrition aspect for your online business, or did you start with the conditioning aspect?
Yeah, so I started with nutrition specifically because when I had my meal prep company, I was like, okay, I still want to do stuff in nutrition, business and nutrition, but I don't want to. I had a kitchen, I had employees, I had overhead. It was really expensive and really overwhelming. I was like 26 at the time. So that was like, for me, with no business partner and no business plan, I was like, not sustainable. I'm miserable, but I still want to help people with their nutrition. I love to cook. I love to teach people how to eat healthy meals and fuel their bodies. And so that turned into me having online clients for nutrition specifically, where I was doing nutrition coaching online. And then what I found was a lot of the nutrition clients wanted only weight loss. And for me, that's not what I wanted to teach. Like, I honestly could care less about helping people with, like, weight loss is not something that makes me passionate. I want to show you how to do cool shit with your body. Like, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to show you how to do that crazy bendy, like, trick in the air that you've been working so hard to get, and you're finally eating enough protein and, like, are able to time your carbs around your workout so you feel energized and you feel strong enough to do that. Like, that's the kind of nutrition I want to teach. I'm not about trying to, like, tell, pole dancers to eat less in order to be lighter to get up in the air. Like, that's not what I want to do. So, yeah. So when it became more of like, I just want to lose weight, I was like, all right, I need to reframe how I'm doing this. And then that turned into conditioning, and then cross training, and then kind of trickled into more of like the strength and conditioning portion, as opposed to, yeah. So that's how it ended there.
Can I ask you, for our viewers and our listeners out there, to give us kind of just general guidelines of how polers should be eating, or yeah, just kind of a little more info, because I love what you said. Like, at this point, I feel that in my own journey too. I'm not eating to lose weight to feel lighter. I'm eating so that I can maintain a certain level of training and I can train consistently and my body feels fueled.
Yeah.
Just that more students would hear that and kind of take that into account. Can you, just touch up on that a little bit?
Yeah. So generally speaking, any pole dancer who is working a lot needs to be aware that they're breaking their muscle tissue down as they're moving their body, right? And the more classes you take, the more programs you take, the more times you take privates, or the more training you do in general, the more your body's going to break down. So you're going to need to make sure that you're getting enough protein in order to repair and recover. And so I would say, generally speaking, I say, depending on if you do pounds or kilograms or however you measure, I'm just going to say in pounds because I'm living in America and that's what comes to my brain. But I say 0.8 grams of protein per 1 pound of body weight. Okay. So for me, I'm about 150 pounds. That translates to a minimum of 120 grams of protein when I do the math. So you can do 0.08 times your body weight, and then you'll get a specific number. And what I find is, typically, if you just try and hit that number all the time, if you're not used to consuming enough protein, it can feel super overwhelming. So what I always suggest is my clients do track for about a week. So you can use some sort of nutrition tracking app, get a general idea of how much nutrition or how much protein you're consuming. So say, like, on average, you're eating, if I needed to get 120 grams of protein, but like before I was bringing awareness to it, I was eating on average maybe 80 grams of protein, and I was noticing my body was really tired all the time and I was getting injured really easily. And it was just really, there was a lot of effort that it took to get up in the air. I would be like, okay, if I'm starting at 80 grams, I'm going to add about 10% every single week so my body is able to adapt and adjust and it's not overwhelming. So I would probably, so 8% is like 8 to 10 grams of protein. So week 1, I would do, maybe 90 grams of protein and fill that in. 10 grams doesn't seem as overwhelming. The week after that, 100 grams, and kind of like slowly add about 10%. like every 1 to 2 weeks until it's number one, easier for the person. And number two, it's feels like it's more realistic. So, and you're starting to realize, okay, this is where I can get this source of protein, or this is where, especially if you're not eating meat, you're going to have to bring a little bit more awareness to that, in terms of like complex proteins and, like, just thinking about how it all works together. So, yeah. So I would say slowly adding in until you hit that number and then see how it makes you feel. So if 120 grams of protein feels good and you're feeling satisfied and you're feeling energized and you're recovering well, awesome. But if you're feeling like you're now starting to train for competition, for example, and you're increasing your activity, in terms of pull training, you might want to start to increase your protein as well, because you're going to need a little bit more nutrients in order to recover. So that would be my suggestion with protein. And then with, just like understanding how much you're eating in general, because a lot of times we tend to potentially like under eat when we are training really hard. Like pull's a really intensive sport, and the activity that we're doing in the air can take a lot out of us, and we just don't really think about it. So bringing awareness to how much you're consuming, is going to be really important. And one thing I always suggest is like timing food around your workout. So having some faster digesting carbs, which would be like fruit, white rice, I don't know, some toast pre-workout. You don't want like too much protein, and try and minimize the fat pre-workout, and then post-workout having like a larger meal with protein, carbs. Then you can have fats post-workout, but kind of timing your nutrition around your workout so you can get the most bang for your buck. So that's kind of how I would look at that, but like specifically having faster digesting carbs pre-workout just for energy, and then having carbs and protein post-workout to make sure that you're recovering efficiently. And then making sure you're drinking enough water. And then that's like, if you can do those three things, like if you can half your body weight in ounces of water, that's a good place to start.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That's amazing tips for anybody listening and watching us. I kind of want your opinion as well, because you do online coaching and you have one-on-one clients and group and stuff. I also teach pole, and I feel, and this is also how I felt about my own pole journey. I started polling as an adult. My studio was also 18 and up, but I started way later. I started at 25, being really unhealthy. And then I got so excited about pole that at some point I was like, oh, maybe I should be eating better. You know what? Maybe I should be fueling my body better. Do you feel, because pole mainly is a sport that gets picked up later in life for most people, and I call us like muggles, people that don't pole usually.
Yeah.
Do you feel in a lot of your clients as well, kind of nutrition and conditioning comes after they fall in love with pole, because then they kind of want to up their pole level?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It is not a sexy sell. Conditioning and nutrition is not a sexy sell. It's like, I always say, like I always say whenever I do conditioning, it's like the broccoli of the pole world. Like, it's good for you, but you don't always want to eat it. Like, you kind of have to eat your broccoli before you have your cake.
Yeah, I also say this all the time, and I'm the worst for this. And I tell my student, I'm like, I will go to class and actively complain as we're conditioning.
Yeah.
But I feel bad if I don't condition, and I know it's going to help me out. So I'm like, we're going to condition. We can all complain together, and we'll all like throw ourselves a little pity party as we're doing these, but we're going to do it.
Yep. Yes, 1000%. Yeah. It's like, let's all bitch and moan, but this is why community is important. You need a safe space to get cranky together. And then you're like, cool, we can now do all the cool things together because our bodies are strong enough to do this now.
Do you feel like you saw a big difference for yourself, for some of your clients, when they kind of do align training with nutrition, with conditioning?
Yeah, 1000%. When it started with me because I didn't realize how important having structured conditioning and cross training was. I didn't even know what cross training was when I was doing it. I was just like, oh, weightlifting makes me stronger. Cool. Awesome. I'm going to keep doing more of this. But there was no like, this is intentional. It was just more of like, I'm seeing benefits and now I'm going to do more of it. And so now I think a lot of people are just like when they add it in, they realize that it's beneficial. And then it's just finding a strategy that works specific to their goals, because a lot of times you don't need to do a ton of conditioning or a ton of cross training in order to get like to level up. A lot of times you just need to be smart about like the time and place that you do it in addition to your pole training. So it's not super overwhelming. But yeah, I definitely 1000% see a huge difference.
And then can we also just quickly touch up on that? Once again, kind of general guidelines. And if listeners want more, then they can reach out to you on your platforms. But how would you say for the average polar, how should they be incorporating conditioning? Like how often would you aim? How often would you feel like they should be training? And I know this will vary greatly between who you are. These are just guidelines. For any specific, reach out to Stacey.
Yeah. So I would say let's use a pole dancer who's taking 3 classes a week, right? If you're taking 3 classes a week and this is like your chosen like way that you want to like, this is your chosen like fitness that you want to pursue. So if pole is getting stronger and pole is the end goal, here's how I would do it if you were taking pole 3 times a week. I would start looking at your specific goals, number one, with pole. So for example, if it's 2025 and you're like, this is the year I'm going to get my butterfly. Let's use butterfly as a end goal trick. But right now you're still kind of struggling with your inverts. I would suggest adding, because at the end of the day, these inverted movements like a butterfly is going to be a full body motion or movement, because you do need your legs, you do need your core, you do need your upper body. So I would structure, if you could do 2 days of about 30 minutes of cross training per day, that's an hour a week. That would be a great place to start. You don't need to do it like crazy. I would say if you do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, pole dance classes, I would have you do conditioning on Tuesdays and Thursdays for about 30 minutes. 30 minutes of specific conditioning cross training and conditioning on, So I'm thinking cross training right now. So my brain's going to cross training. So it's 30 minutes, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and then 30 minutes, if you can, of conditioning those same days as well, potentially, give or take. And it doesn't have to be like 30 minutes, like go, 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 just like allot yourself 30 minutes. If you can give yourself like a half an hour, so that's like an hour additional of cross training and then an hour extra of conditioning per week, you can break that up however it fits for your schedule. But like 2 hours per week, 1 cross training, 1 conditioning will make a huge difference. And then in addition, because you're going to feel like your body's probably a little bit stiffer, thinking about where you can add that mobility in there as well. So that's the third thing I would think
2
about.
hours seem attainable, right? Because too often I hear people that are starting out or they've been pulling for like a year or two and they're like trying to get the next big thing. And they're like, oh my God, I'm going to go to the gym every day this week. And I'm going to start like powerlifting because I'm sorry, I really want to make, and I'm like, oh boy, hold on.
Yeah.
Take it back a step. Can I also say this for people that have not put 2 and 2 together on what you were saying? You did not name every day of the week because there's 2 days you didn't name. And I have a feeling that those would probably be used for mobility and rest, wouldn't they?
Yeah. So when I do creative conditioning, when I work with my people in creative conditioning, we have generally like 3 days of the week where I'm giving them classes. And then we talk like having 1 full day of recovery. I always say the magic happens in the recovery, because you can't expect to see like progress if you're not allowing your body to recover efficiently. So yeah, I feel like a lot of times we think we need more, when in reality, we just need to be smarter about how we train.
I love that. And I would 100% agree. And as people will be listening to the first season, a lot of our guests say the same thing. And I think the same as a pole teacher. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of other pole teacher would say the same for their student. We pick it up and we fall in love with it. And we're going so intense that I have to remember people like, I have seen you at the studio every day this week. Like, when are you resting? When are you recovering?
Yeah.
Feel like that's not acknowledged enough when we get so excited.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, seriously.
I want to ask you, because we all want to know. like when you're an average polar, like I'm an average polar, we look up to people at your level and we're like, how did you get there? How are you training for yourself? What are you training right now? Like, can you take us through like what you're doing right now for yourself, how you train, how, like, what gets you excited? What are you kind of focusing on, or what's your goal?
Yeah. So I'm going to be totally honest. I struggle to train for myself because as somebody who works full time as a pole coach, I'm constantly focusing on helping other people. But I will say I have a designated night where I personally, it's just fun night where I jam with my friends. And this is Tuesday. So tonight is Tuesday night. We always, it's Tuesday pole jam, and it's whatever we want to bring, whatever we want to work on. And I block off my calendar no matter what. That Tuesday night is going to be the most important thing. So I do have that. I consistently train. CrossFit's my preferred cross training of choice. So I do that 3 to 4 times a week, depending on what the programming is and what it looks like for me. And then typically when I teach, I do a lot of the mobility and the conditioning with my students. So I'll say when I teach, I do a lot of that, selfishly for myself too. But it's good because like I think sometimes having your instructor do it with you, like with the conditioning and the mobility, is like it helps kind of like everyone's doing it together. So I will say a lot of the conditioning and the mobility I do with my students. When it comes to tricks specifically, I will say I probably train only 2 days a week specific to tricks for myself because I'm teaching at this point right now when it comes to virtual stuff as well. Like I'm on a pole probably 5 to 6 days a week, but only like 2 specific training for myself. So I'd say right now I train a little bit more with cross training. And then probably 2 days specific to pull for myself. And then for tricks right now, I am really trying to get comfortable in doing fongies multiple times. That's what I'm trying to do because I went to the U.S. Pole Championship it was up in LA, and I saw it was like a Gennaro to multiple fongie thing. And I was like, this is my goal for 2024 or 2025. And just like getting out of the fear of that. And then I'm thinking about competing in March. I haven't decided yet, but if I do, my goals are going to shift a little bit. So I'm going to have to think about how I'm able to schedule my days a little bit more because as a coach, being able to prioritize training for me becomes a little bit more challenging. So there's just going to have to be some schedule manipulation. So I'm not burnt out when I see my clients.
Absolutely. And because we have touched up a bit on competition with other guests as well.
Yeah.
Can you hear a little bit about yourself? Like, how much time in advance do you need to take that decision? Because right now you're thinking about it. Do
Yeah.
you kind of tell yourself a date where you have to be sure because you kind of have to prep for it? Like, how long does it take you to prep for your competition?
Yeah. Well, for this specific one, I need to know by tomorrow. So the registration date is tomorrow. Typically I like to give myself at least 8 weeks to train. That would be ideal. And this one I'm not as stressed out about because I was thinking about revisiting an old piece that I did 2 years ago that I wanted to do. So I'm not as like there's a lot of things that are already together. But when I run competition training programs, we run them in 10-week block.
And then what, not specifically, but kind of general outlines once again, because we've heard from different guests how they get themselves ready. How would you go from, if you weren't revisiting a piece, how would you train yourself? Like, how's the process of you putting a piece together or deciding what tricks are in it, deciding the music? You say about 10 weeks is what usually you kind of put in there. How are you allotting those 10 weeks? Like, what's the process through that?
Yeah. And this is tips that I would give anybody who is trying to compete or perform and they're not really sure what they want to do. Sometimes choreography can be really challenging. So my first tip would be not to learn a bunch of new movements specifically for this piece because that's going to be super overwhelming. I would give, so on day one of training, I have my students write down, and I do this for myself, 3 to 6 tricks that they want to start to sequence together, whether that be on the floor or whether that be in the air. You know, I'm not like you have to do, and if you're not sure of the name, you can be like, if it's a floor work, you could be like roll over to split thingy majigger, whatever. But just write down the things that you want to start to incorporate into I call it a structured freestyle. So it's a freestyle where you're not really sure exactly where it's going to go, but you have some light guidelines there. And so from there, picking a piece of music and then just going for it. I always have myself and my students record that. And then it's like, okay, what do you like from this? Keep that. What do you not like? Take that, throw that in the trash, you know, like, so take what feels good and leave what doesn't. Then the next week we build from there. And then kind of like work in terms of that sort of progression. And that's how I personally train and how I train my students, because that gives you kind of like a starting point and something to kind of manipulate and mold. And then you can add or take away depending on what feels good. When I start getting training consistently and really start to like put my head in, okay, I'm like, I really want to win this. I do get more specific with my nutrition as well. So right now I'm kind of like, I eyeball everything, but I really prioritize eating enough. So typically, because I'm training more, I'll increase my calories about 200 to 300 just to make sure that I have enough energy. And I'm not putting my body at risk for injury, because as I'm pushing my body more, I'm breaking it down and you could potentially injure yourself. So I want to make sure that I'm fueling that energy, or fueling the energy needed and specific to recovery. So I'll increase my food about 200 to 300 calories, depending on how much more I'm adding in. And then because I do a lot of CrossFit, I really have to prioritize for myself, at least, adding more flexibility and mobility in, because I will otherwise get really stiff. And for me, I need to, if you are somebody who likes to lift heavy like I do, you got to really prioritize balancing that out with additional mobility and flexibility. So yeah, those are like the 3 things I really think about.
I love that you eat more, not less. And I think that's such a big misconception. Once again, a lot of us that pole have other jobs outside of pole. We're not full-time athletes.
Yeah.
A lot of people came with no physical like fitness background to pole, and then all of a sudden we're doing these crazy things without the knowledge of nutrition, without the knowledge of how do you cross train. And I love hearing that, like, yeah, you should be eating more, you should be fueling your body, you should be really kind of focusing on mobility and stretching and like injury prevention. And I think a lot of us don't, and we should. And I hope that 2025 is the year that more of us hear that we need to eat more of the right thing, but also like, yeah, focus on other things, not just the next big thing. I kind of also want to ask you, because you have done competition, for anybody listening that is going through their first competition or is kind of a little apprehensive or something like that. How would you say that your typical week of the competition is going for you? Like, how's your stress level? How do you prep? How do you feel the day of?
Yeah. Competitions are extremely emotionally exhausting. Like, that's a big, yeah. And I commend anybody and want to congratulate anyone who's just getting up on stage, because it's a huge deal just to get up on stage, knowing that you're going to have judges there nitpicking a piece that probably means a lot to you. And that can feel really vulnerable and scary. And so I've done so many competitions, and no matter how many times I do a competition, I still feel like it's still scary regardless. So I just want to validate, if anyone's like, this should feel normal at some point. Competitions typically are not just like a normal thing for anybody, no matter how long. I mean, unless maybe some people, but for the majority of us, nerves are normal.
I'd say for anybody I spoke to, and I have asked this question now a couple of times, no one has an answer like, no big deal. I just stroll in there like nothing. No. Everybody's like, this is my routine. This is like how I prep it. This is the nerve level I'm feeling that day. So completely normal.
Yes, nerves are normal. And then just like thinking about going into the week of, ideally you would want your full piece done about 2 weeks prior. That would be the perfect goal. We're not all perfect. Like we're human. We're not robots, but like giving yourself about 2 weeks of wiggle room after everything is finished would be ideal. Because that way, if you need to make any slight modifications, it's not going to feel as overwhelming. So ideally about 2 weeks prior to competition, we would finish, or we would have a finished piece. You'd be able to practice it consistently the week leading up to competition, the second week leading up to competition. And then the week leading up to competition, you would have like I call it a deload week, where maybe you practice it once or twice. This is where you have like your dress rehearsal. If your competition is on a Saturday, the last time you run it would be on like a Wednesday. And so you're allowing your body to fully rest and recover. And then you're able to just focus on like stretching and mobility and like doing some self-care to get your head on right before stepping on stage. So ideally, you're not running your piece up until the last day, because typically when I see people do that, they're exhausted by the time it comes, the stage time comes, the competition comes. And when you have a finished piece and your body's feeling rested, the last piece of the puzzle is just making sure you feel mentally like able to present it. And what I'd see is if your head's not on right and you're like kind of all over the place because the nerves are getting to you, the judges can see that, and you'll maybe be looking down at I've had so many times where judges are like, look up, make eye contact with us, smile more, like we want to see more expression in your face. And when you're nervous, like it's really easy to try and hide with like your facial expressions, and you want to be like as performative as possible, and really put your best foot forward. So that's why I would say have like your piece finished and really try and have like a last round on Wednesday, just so you can feel really good going into competition weekend.
I love that. And I feel like I'm learning a lot as well. I've never competed, and I hope it's the same for a lot of our viewers and listener. Kind of the thing I'm taking out of this is a lot of people that have competed, and I've been asking this question, rest. A lot of people say that they don't run full routines the week of. They're like, I'm going in there, my routine's built, I'll work on certain sequences here and there, but I'm really going into it feeling good about my body. I've given it the rest it needs. I know my piece. I'm not there like frantically trying to piece puzzle pieces together. Well, I love that your answer is kind of on par with what we've heard so far in other episodes about, people that really put the time in to compete. I kind of wanted to ask you, how do you feel your first competition went, and how did you kind of feel about the whole process?
First competition was at a biker show at a random pull up there. No, I blacked out. I didn't plan anything. It's so embarrassing. Horribly. It went absolutely horribly. No, it was not good. It was not good.
We'll also say this, competition back then to what competition now are, like there's such a big, because you touched up on this at the beginning, right? You're like, oh, I started in like 29.
Yeah.
It was so different. There wasn't as many people pulling. I'm sure it was the same for like the competition scenes and what was out there and how the setup was.
Yeah. No, we found an ad in the newspaper for this competition because there was one other competition and it was in a bar. You had to be 21. I was 19, and I was able to walk into this little biker expo, and they had a stage pull there, and you were like, if you want to sign up for this pull competition, you can. And I was like, okay. And so me and my friend did, and I blacked out the entire, I couldn't even tell you. I won $100, which was cool.
At 19 counts.
But it was not anything. I'm sure if I looked back at that video, I would be like, what was going on here? I can tell you that my first competition was a shit show. It took many, many practices and many, many kind of like, okay, there is a rhythm here. And then once I started doing more organized competitions where like, because they started to become bigger and bigger, and it was more of a, okay, let's go travel for this. then it was more, I had more of a system and more of like, okay, I'm going to plan for this and we're going to go through some training. And then it also helped when I was working as an entertainer. Like I was working and I was performing regularly. So I was getting more people time on a very regular basis. So yeah, no, but first competition was a mess.
Feel what I'm taking away from this whole not competition, pardon, this whole conversation is where you're at now. A lot of those achievements are based off of the system you've put in place for yourself, thought you put in place, and kind of mapping it out a little bit better than kind of just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks, just with your nutrition and your cross training and being mindful about those and putting in time for strength training, mobility training, and rest days, and then planning out your competition piece. And I think a lot of us lack that maybe, or we don't know, right? We're just kind of coming to the sport being like, I'll do whatever I can, but not really being as mindful. And I think you're doing a great job at being like, no, you can actually be smarter about your planning, all of that. And that's really, really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's only taken like half my life. So yeah, time is your best friend.
All right, Stacey, I've taken enough of your time. I want us to get to the last segment, which we call the last grip. These are shorter questions. You can give us 1 or 2 words or just a little bit of a sentence if you want to. They're just meant for our viewers and our listener to kind of review a little bit more.
Yeah.
So are you ready?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Coffee or tea? I don't think anybody has answered tea yet, so.
Coffee person, caffeine.
Here we go. Favorite song to dance to right now?
Purple Hat by Sophie Tucker.
All right.
Yeah.
Most loved pull outfit or accessory?
Accessory. I have these like black shorts with little garters that like make my butt look really good.
I feel like 80% of my students have those. I also have those.
Yeah. It's
Look
a little garter booty.
I make everybody look good.
Yep. The booty lift.
Heels or barefoot?
Barefoot.
1 word to describe your relationship with pole.
Well, gosh, evolving.
I love that. That's actually a really good one.
Evolving.
Spin or static?
Oh, that's a hard one.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'd say currently spin, but it might change in a couple months.
I feel like it goes back and forth, right? Ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
Choreo or tricks?
I'm a tricks girly. I would love to say choreo, but tricks just make me happy.
Morning practice or evening practice?
Evening.
Can you tell us 2 or 3 of your favorite polars or people we should be following? Anybody you enjoy following?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say Marla Fiskin was like one of the first polars to kind of like inspire me and be Marla Fiskin and Marla Fiskin and Natasha Wang. Natasha Wang is also like one of my people.
Okay, I do follow Natasha.
Yeah.
I love what she posts.
Yeah, I love what she posts as well. And then just biased because I love Emily. She's super smart and she's one of my best friends. Emily Rausch is like I love her as a human being, and a polar. Like we're very different in our poll, and when we jam together, it's just like we're very different, but it's just like so fun to watch. So yeah.
Yeah, and I also follow Emily. I just feel her content is super educational as well. And yeah, if you're not following her, give her a follow as well. I think you'll enjoy her page and what she posts as well. Love or hate for conditioning?
Love/hate conditioning.
Can you tell us one of your nemesis moves, something you really struggle with?
Anything with thread throughs. I have really short arms and a long torso and really short legs. So anything that involves me trying to thread through, I'm like literally my arms are teeny and my torso's really long. And I don't care how much you're going to tell me how to do it. My physical body will not reach. So any sort of long arm or leg thready through things, I'm like, it's just impossible for me. Not
on a positive note, can you tell us your favorite move or kind of family moves? Anything like that?
Yeah, I love Iron X's. actually, this was one that I never thought I'd love, but I now run the intensive, and it's Bird of Paradise is one of my comfort tricks now, and I love it so much. So I'd say Iron X's and Bird of Paradises are my two. I'll throw them in everything.
I saw a couple of your posts on Bird of Paradise because you do have the intensive. It looks amazing on you. And
Thank you. Yeah.
holy cow, is that a hard move for people that aren't at that level or have never tried it? I'm at like progression -1 for that move, and I am already struggling. So also definitely look out for Stacey's intensive on Bird of Paradise.
Yes.
And then kind of close this off, can you tell us how can we support you? Where can we find you? What should be looking at?
So Stacey Q Shapiro on Instagram, pretty much all social platforms. I don't really change my name. I don't think I have. And then, yeah, you can do staceyquinnutrition.com. That's my website. And then I'll have Creative Conditioning, which is my signature pole strength and conditioning membership, which will be coming up later this month. So I'll be posting a little bit about that, we're in January right now. I'm not sure when this podcast is going to come out, but we're in January. So I'll be launching that. And then, I'll do like workshops and things. And yeah, that's all I have right now.
Hey, that's still a lot. And
Yeah.
then I will put all that information as well in the caption for our viewers and our listeners. Make sure you give Stacey a follow and you look at her. Everything basically you offer is amazing. And then, yeah, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for chatting with me. I love this.
And we will see you next week, or you will hear about us next week for the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to Between the Poles. Thank you so much for tuning in to Between the Poles. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. Stay connected with us on social media, and we'll see you next time right here, Between the Poles.